Hello everybody, welcome back to another book-related video here on my channel, and I've been seeing this trend go around all over book YouTube, so I did want to do the same thing and make a video basically being like a half of the year wrap up, all the books that I've read for this whole half year. I do have my son right here, so he probably will talk. He's very intrigued with all the books, and he also has his tractor, so please ignore him. But otherwise, my overall goal for this year is not a very big number. It's honestly just 25, and I have already hit that. I'm very happy to be done. I've been in kind of a slump, but I somehow already hit my goal. My goal for this year was only 25, and as of right now, I'm sitting at 26 read books. Technically only 25 because one of them is a daily devotional, and I wanted to be the first person to leave a review, especially since I know the person. Also, I won't be finishing that till December, but I will be finishing that no matter what. It is just a devotional. But otherwise, I want to go into the 25 books that I have read this year, and hopefully by the end of this, I will be maybe around 40 to hopefully maybe 60. That'd be really good if I could read a little bit more, get out of my little life slumps and just book slump in general. So let's hop into the first section of books, and all of this is not necessarily in order of how I read it this year, but it will be in order if they are a whole series. Otherwise, they are just random books. First book we're going to talk about is To All the Boys I Loved Before, and of course, since I read this book, I then read P.S. I Still Love You, and also Always and Forever, Laura Jean. To All the Boys I Loved Before was a 3-star read for me. I kind of like this a little bit. It wasn't necessarily one of the best, but it also wasn't necessarily bad. It just took me back in time to high school, and also I did not necessarily enjoy the lying that came with fake dating, but that's just because in general I don't actually like lying. P.S. I Still Love You was a 4-star, and I remember I read this one pretty quickly. I think this was my second quickest read, and then the next book was actually the fastest. This one I did over the course of a night, and then the next following day, or a day and then the next following night, but it took me only 2 days. I was really intrigued into this one. There was a lot going on though, and I just felt like the drama and everything with this book was just a little more interesting to me than the first book. And then Always and Forever, Laura Jean was 3 stars, and this is because you randomly fast forward, I think like a whole year towards their senior year, if I remember correctly. This was in the very beginning of this year that I read this, around Valentine's Day. And then also they were just back and forth, not knowing what they wanted, or if they just wanted to break up because one was going to college, or where they were going to college. And I didn't like that, because if you guys kind of know, I'm actually in a military family, and also I've always wanted to be in the military. I always knew for the most part I was going to be away from people. And secondly is the fact that my husband is actually on the Thunderbirds, so he's gone 200 out of 365 days a year. Of course, there is that feeling of how much it sucks to be in a long distance relationship, but in my opinion, you should not break up just because you're not going to necessarily see each other. Honestly, my husband and I both think about it is distance helps to create a stronger bond, and that's not like we get annoyed with each other when we're together. It's just saying that every time we come back together, it's just so much more heartfelt and it's so much more enjoyable. And personally, even though today actually is our 4-year anniversary being just married, I still have butterflies every time he comes home, so it's very exciting, and we are both very much still basically dating even though we've been married for a couple years. So this book kind of annoyed me just a smidge, but I did read this one pretty much in a whole sitting, but over the course of one day. At the end of last year in November, and also going into December, I started reading the whole Twilight series. I've never read that series before until then. I found them all at a thrift store, pretty much all hardbacks, all very good quality. Then came 2023, and I went on Thrift Books and bought Midnight Sun. I thought this book was an addition to the Twilight series. I did not know it was the first book and a little bit, I think, of the second, if I remember correctly, all in Edward's point of view. So I was a little bit discouraged to read it because I just spent 2 months reading the whole series, and then I was rereading it, and I liked the series. I thought it was interesting. I wasn't a big fan on Bella compared to Edward, and I do love the series more in Edward's point of view, but I also did rate this one 3 stars because I was not prepared to reread the whole series. Another series I started reading for the first time, I think I might have read the first, maybe the second book, but I finally picked it up and I'm almost finished with the series, is Harry Potter. First we have Year 1, and this is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and I rated this one 4 stars. This was a pretty decent, kind of quick, it's one of the smallest books, or it is the smallest book I do believe, out of the whole series, and it started off really nice, but I think I remember reading this one, so it was like a reread. I just don't remember finishing it. A little bit of things that were different from the movies, but for the most part, this one is pretty accurate. Then we have Harry Potter and the Chamber as secrets, and this one was 4 stars as well. This is where I feel like the movie started to differ from the books just a smidge. As I go down, it gets a little bit worse, but I do like some of the things that happen in here. Pretty much it was like the movie, so if you've seen the movies and you can remember the movies, these are similar to the books, very, very, very similar. Then we have The Prisoner of Azkaban, and this is my favorite movie out of the whole franchise of Harry Potter, and this book was one of my favorites. I don't think it is now my complete favorite, but it is one of them, and this is where I really started seeing a few differences from the movie to the book, and it started getting progressively worse, but not worse like bad quality. I didn't enjoy it. It was worse as in they stopped being as accurate, but it was still very accurate. It was just a little less accurate compared to the previous 2 books. Sirius Black is one of my favorite characters, and I absolutely love this whole book, this whole movie. We then have The Goblet of Fire. This is the 4th book, and I rated this one as well 4 stars. I'm pretty sure the majority of the series is going to be 4 stars, but this one was one of the first chunky ones. This was a really good read. It kind of kept me entertained the whole time, and since I also knew what was going to happen, I wasn't necessarily blindsided, but I did enjoy reading this and then learning about the Triwizard Tournament. And then the last Harry Potter book that I've read is The Order of the Phoenix, and this one really was a great one. I was really excited to read this one, and honestly, I hate Dolores Umbridge. She's so much worse in the books than she is in the movies, and she's terrible in the movies, but this one actually was a 5-star read. I love everything about this except for what happens with Sirius. Other than that, this was just so entertaining, and it was a pretty chunky book as well, but honestly, it was just so full of information, and I was just enjoying every bit of it. We then tackled And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, and this one was 5 stars. I was entertained the whole time. I feel like it took me just a smidge to get into it, like 20 pages if I remember, and that's because I thought it was going to be so many POVs that I was not going to be able to follow along. It was very easy, and I thought I knew who was killing everybody at the end, and in reality I was correct, and then all of a sudden it switched and I was wrong, and it took me by surprise. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, it kept me on my toes, so this was a 5-star read. Here recently I just finished Stephen King's Cell, and this one took me for a little bit of a whirlwind, but it was a 5-star read. It was just one of those books that you could definitely tell it was a Stephen King thriller. Right in the very beginning, you hop in and page 8, there is a guy biting a dog's ear off, and pretty much that's how the story went for a pretty decent chunk, and then it started changing, and I don't enjoy how this ended. I almost marked it down to 4 stars just because of how the ending was, but I really enjoyed the overall book, and so that made up for it. It kind of took me by surprise, and I was really intrigued the whole time, but I know it's also a kind of gruesome book at the same time. I'm always a little bit of a Nicholas Sparks fan. His books are just something that are kind of quick and easy, and this year I think I've only read one of his, but I did pick up True Believer, and this is technically part 1, or book 1 I mean, in a series, and I read the 2nd book first many years ago, and then I picked up this one, and it went okay, honestly. In the end, I forgot totally about the other book, and then all of a sudden halfway through, or a little bit through, I realized that it was a series because I was like, this book sounds like another book that I heard of, and honestly it was because of that. I was also kind of in a slump because I knew I was getting books in, and I was real excited to read certain books that were coming in the mail, so I wanted to finish this as fast as possible, and I only rated this book 3 stars as well, but it wasn't necessarily bad. It was just I wasn't necessarily feeling it after a while. We then have Max Lucado's 6 Hour One Friday, and this is basically just a Christian book telling a bunch of stories, and a lot of them I heard, so a little bit of repetition was going on just because I was very familiar with the stories. And then there's a back section with study guide information, and I rated this one 3 stars. The topics were great, but since I heard them already multiple times in my life, I just didn't necessarily feel like I retained or got new information, at least from this book, so I just kept it at 3 stars. Last year I read one book from Tatiana D. Rosne, and it was a 5-star read. It was Sarah's Key. A lot of people apparently have seen the movie but never read the book, and honestly, especially with me having a son, it did something to my emotions. I didn't cry, but there was a lot of things that even on the back of the book you can read and probably assume, and I knew it was going to happen, but I also didn't think that the author was going to leave the book not a happily ever after type thing. I love that book so much that when I went to a thrift store, I seen A Secret Kept in the thrift store, and I instantly grabbed it because it looked very similar to Sarah's Key. The font was the same, everything like that, and I thought originally this was going to be a teenager or a young adult that ran away from home, and this red coat I knew was going to be something that was special with the story, but I wasn't completely sure what. In the end, I was wrong what that was about. It was basically a mother who passed away, and she had a secret that I am not going to talk about. One, because I don't talk about those things on my channel, but secondly, because of the fact that that would spoil the whole book. This was a great read. The only issue I had with it is I never took French. I only took German, so I had no clue what half the words, like actual places, were. So I did mark this down to 4 stars, but it was a page turner for me. Then we have Wait Till Helen Comes, and this was just a small little reread. All of her books that I have are from middle school, maybe elementary school, from the Scholastic book fairs, and I was obsessed with her, loved her little stories. This book is a little bit kiddie-ish, but at the same time, it was just pretty much as good as the first time I read it. I needed a little light-hearted, fun little book, and I did rate this one 4 stars. Also, from this author, I did read All the Lovely Bad Ones after the Stephen King Cell book because I just needed a little simple, easy, lighthearted read as well. Even though this is still about ghosts, coming off of that Stephen King book, I needed something that I knew wasn't going to necessarily be so crazy and hectic, and I did pick this up. Again, it was meant for younger audiences, so I rated this one 4 stars as well. Then we have Darkwood. I love this book. I got this a long time ago, and I remember I read a lot of it, and then I lost the book somewhere, and my mom bought it for me, and I remember it was like months later. Finally finished it, but I couldn't remember a lot about this book. So I love this book. I reread it just because I wasn't sure what to read, and I was in between the Harry Potter series, and I didn't necessarily want to start a new series, but I also didn't really have too many standalones, so I did reread this one, and I rated this one 4 stars. It was just as good as I can remember, at least the parts that I remember, but also there were some parts that I totally forgot about, so I kind of was a little bit blindsided, just a smidge. Then while everybody else was rereading this book, I read Beach Read for the first time, and I honestly didn't see the hype as much as other people. I didn't think it was necessarily a bad book. I did rate it 4 stars, but I feel like everybody was overhyping it, in my opinion, but I was also kind of in a little bit of a book slump, like starting out, so I enjoyed the characters. I liked the plot of it. I thought it was really cool about like the having 2 authors that then switched genres and having a little deal or bet kind of in between the 2. I thought that was really cool and a new tactic, a book that I've never really read. I didn't necessarily see where everybody was raving about it's a 5-star read, it's the best romance book they've ever read. I personally, I enjoyed it, but I didn't necessarily love it that much to rate it 5 stars. I also read The Unhoneymooners, and I rated this one 4 stars, but I do think looking back, it's more of a 3 stars. This was one of the first real romance type books that I read, besides Nicholas Sparks or Christian romance, so it definitely kind of was a nice little ease into it because it wasn't necessarily descriptive about too many things. The main character, Olive, was a little bit annoying to me or just over dramatic. I realized after doing my wrap up, everybody else who reviews this book does not like Ethan, and I was one of the only females who did. I didn't care much for Olive, and also I could see his point to a point. I think, you know, if you're dating somebody, you need to believe them at all times, but also I was putting myself in his shoes, and I was discovering information about my brother like that. I could understand being thrown off and not wanting to believe it. I think he went about it wrong, but otherwise I agree more with Ethan than I did Olive. I think she was just making up way too much stuff and being over dramatic about everything, and also the reason she didn't like Ethan and she thought he hated her was all because of her in the beginning, because she literally thought too hard into a look that he made, which is kind of controversial and a not popular opinion at all. Recently, I just read The Identicals, and besides the morals or the lack of morals in this book with these 2 twins, I really enjoyed the story. I liked everything for the most part. I liked the ending to a point. I think, you know, it's a little bit messed up, but at the same time, it was kind of like you were wanting to root for them, even though logically or morally it wasn't right, unless this, I don't want to go into detail, but basically there is cheating in this book, and also there's a married person, so I don't want to go into detail and spoil anything, but basically 2 twins, they switch islands, and I love this book. All of Ellen Hildebrand's books take me a while to get into for whatever reason, but once I'm into them, I'm really intrigued the whole time, and I rated this one 4 stars. There's just little things that she puts in to her writing that honestly I don't think need to be in there. Super descriptive about characters that that are in there for 1 minute, and it's always something that's more political, or you can say woke nowadays is the term, and I don't necessarily care much for that, but at the same time, it wasn't enough to necessarily ruin this whole story. Earlier in the year, I read The Hotel Nantucket. This was my first book from Ellen Hildebrand. Same thing, took me a little bit to get into it, but once I was into it, I really liked it, and I liked the POV from Grace, the ghost who burned alive basically in the hotel, and I also like seeing all the different things. I suspected somebody else, I suspected a guy for the famous Instagram like person who came around giving out keys to hotels, and of course it was not correct. Otherwise, this was a intriguing read and I just enjoyed it. It was very hyped up all over TikTok and BookTube when I did pick it up, but at the same time I found it at a thrift store for a couple bucks, so I feel like I scored on it. And then we have a very fun series that I was honestly obsessed with. I read so quickly and I enjoyed every minute of it, and I still think back to the series, and I don't remember the actual term. It's like World of something, I don't remember. I just call it the Fable series. We first have point 5 in the series, which is Saint. Then we have book 1, Fable, book 2, Namesake, and book 3, The Last Legacy. My specific reading order for this series would be Fable, Namesake, Saint, and then The Last Legacy. The Last Legacy is the same world, different people. Same with Saint to a point, but it's about Fable's mother and father. And also there is a couple spoilers that if you retain information, if you read this first, you're gonna spoil 2 major things that happen in both of these books. One happens in the first book and then the other one happens in the second one. That's why I say read Fable, Namesake, Saint, and then The Last Legacy. Like I said, the series is so amazing, and I think I started Fable late at night and needed to go to bed, so it took me 2 days to read, but I rated this 5 stars. Pretty much you step right into action and the whole book continual action, and I loved it so much. This book does end on a major cliffhanger, so if you want to read this, please be sure to pick up Namesake as well. You're gonna want to just save yourself the trouble. When you go into Namesake, you're going to start completely right off where you left off. It's basically like she wrote a whole book and then just cut it down the middle, and this book was just as great as the first one. I rated this one 5 stars as well. And then I actually read The Last Legacy next, and I thought this was Fable because I thought it was kind of like the same hair color. I thought it was her, so at first I was a little put off, and I did rate this one 4 stars. I think it would have been 5 stars if I would have known beforehand that it was same world, different characters, but otherwise it was not bad at all. The romances in both these books, they're kind of subplots, but I feel like they're so easy to guess. Adrena Young has you rooting for those romances to happen, and I just love this book as well as the other 3. And then of course Saint. This book was also 4 stars. Absolutely love this book, and there was just so much information. Like I said, that if you read before you might spoil, but otherwise it was just a nice, and the covers, all of the covers are so beautiful, and the 3 of them besides The Last Legacy is like a felt, so nice, but The Last Legacy is just a normal slick sleeve. Pretty much all of them have maps inside of them, and they're also beautiful not just on the spine but on the covers. All of them are unique in their own way, and I love that. I love this whole world, and I would love to come back to this world in all honesty. And then we move on to our last book that I kind of have read, but I'm also not fully finished with, and I did go ahead and rate it, and that is our daily devotional. It's just Walk on Water, a daily devotional for believers and educators, and like I said, I'm halfway through. I'm on June 15th, so I have been working on this, and I know I will finish it, but I wanted to go review this. So I have 26 books read, but only mainly 25 finished. No DNFs though this year, which is really amazing, even though I only did 1 DNF last year. And the final book for this whole video that I just started yesterday because I just finished a whole book, and I'm only on page like 6, is The Half-Blood Prince to the Harry Potter series. I'm excited to try and continue the series, finish it. I just have like 3 books left, including The Cursed Child and including this one. So I'm hoping to get through with this one before the end of the month, but I'm not gonna make any promises. I did want to just go ahead and throw this one in just because I did start it. That is all the books for today's video. I hope you guys all enjoyed, and I'm sorry I didn't go into detail about books. I just kind of wanted to do a quick video that wasn't necessarily too descriptive, so it wasn't too long to edit, and I could post this fairly soon. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys got some ideas of some good or interesting looking books. I'll see y'all next week, and God bless.